Hey everybody, this is Andy Leonard, and I'd like to welcome you to this session called Moving Data with Azure Data Factory, or ADF. I'd like to start by introducing our moderator for this session. Eric Romero is here. Good morning, Eric.
Hi, Andy. Good morning. Welcome, and we're so happy to have you here today.
Well, it's exciting to be here. Eric's going to be taking your questions. He made me aware of this. I'll make you aware of it so nobody's thrown. There's about a 30-second delay. So actually, while I'm talking right now, nobody's seeing anything. But what you are seeing when you hear me say that is 30 seconds ago. Okay, don't think about that too much. It's early, especially on the West Coast where Eric is. Thank you so much, Eric, for waking up way early and coming and helping out.
My pleasure, Andy. My pleasure, and welcome everyone. Really
So
excited to be here.
So what we'd like to do is go ahead and type your questions as they come up. If you've got a question, please ask it. Eric's going to moderate, and he's going to make decisions about what to interrupt and ask and what not to. We've got plenty of time, 75 minutes here to do this. And we're just going to talk through all of this stuff. And I promise I'll answer as many of your questions as I can. And if not, I'll provide my email address at the end, and you can reach out to me directly. So with that, I'd just like to share a little bit about these past virtual summit learning pathways. I think this is a pretty cool idea. Yesterday, Leslie presented on a topic called So You Want to Be an Azure Data Engineer When You Grow Up. So this is a problem for me because I haven't grown up yet. Today, I'm presenting this session, and then Dustin is talking about building data lakes later today. And tomorrow, James is going to talk about a data lakehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. So there's some overlap here because Azure Data Factory and Azure Synapse Analytics kind of started from the same spot, but they're growing in ever increasing different directions. So I'd encourage you, if you can, watch these, and if you can't, watch the recordings. For those of you watching the recording, I say a belated hello. So there, a recorded hello. How about that? This is too much information about me, but there's a lot of things on this slide, ways to follow and contact. I'm on Twitch recently and YouTube more so than before. Husband, dad, and granddad. I put the important stuff up top, and then stuff at the bottom about being an engineer, which, by the way, is a warning, just so you know. I am an engineer. I am an author, and 2 books. One just came out this year, and one is on the way through the pipe, probably be out early next year. And I pretty sure these mark books 13 and 14, either that or 14 and 15. I forget, but I've written too many books. Not because I'm smart, it's because I'm an insomniac, and it has way more to do with insomnia than intelligence, I promise you. But I also like to write, so there's that. Pass has some wonderful free offerings that are available here, and they're all on this slide, and you've probably seen this slide already if you've been watching other presentations yesterday. Go check those out. There's this new thing here in the upper left, the Pass Pro member. I'm a Pass Pro member. I recommend it. I'd say I recommend it because it's worth it. It's a value to be able to go in and get access to a lot of other training that is exclusive to Pass Pro members. And I'd encourage you to check that out. Another reason that I'd encourage you to check it out is it helps out Pass. And we want to do what we can in these unprecedented times to support Pass, the organization. So with that, here's our agenda. But before I really get started on my data engineering story and then demos, there's this one thing I'd like to do first. One of the things that I miss about the Pass Summit is seeing all of you in person. And we can't do that this year, and everybody knows why. But what I've created here is a virtual selfie template. So if you can grab a screenshot of this, there's a green screen back there. I know there's some shadows. We did the best I could. I have to credit Emma, my baby girl. She took this picture for me yesterday, and she asked that I give her credit for taking this picture. And I do almost everything my baby girl asked me to do. Let me tell you something out there, man. Baby girls, just you'll know if you don't. Maybe if you're blessed and fortunate. But you can take this picture and insert yourself into that, Photoshop yourself if you're good with that kind of software, and it'll be just like we're there together. Consider it a virtual hub. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to grab that screen capture, and if not, If you're watching the recording, you can just pause the recording and catch the shot. So let's move forward. And I want to tell you a story, a data engineering story. I told you earlier on that slide about me that I'm a grandpa. I have 5 children and 5 grandchildren, and they're all awesome. And so let's sit back and let Grandpa Andy tell you a little story about data engineering. So this is a story of Andy Weather. And Andy Weather actually started, gosh, more than 10 years ago. I want to say 12 or 13 years ago. I was doing cloud before cloud was cool. And GoDaddy offered a DMZ where they would allow you to install SQL Server. I believe it was 2008, but it may have been 2008 R2. And you could talk to that database. It was very cloudish. Again, before people were doing cloud, you could do stuff like that, but you had to stand up a server and register the IP and blah, blah, blah. But they made it so I could just go reach into a database table I'd created, and I could write records and I could read records. And so I started recording the Andy Weather Instruments version 1 there. And I still use that data when I do training classes now, because I love AdventureWorks, but nobody's data is that clean. I'm just saying. So this is actually version 2, and I started collecting data with this weather station. It's an AccuRite weather station. A few years ago, you can see this base station to the lower right of the image there. That actually communicates wirelessly to the other instruments that are kind of behind there. And then there's a USB port and an application that's running on a severely underpowered and old E-machine. This E-machine has 2 gigs of RAM. It's running Windows 7 Pro or Ultimate, I forget which. But yeah, 32-bit. Why would I do this to myself? Well, that's a great question. I warned you I was an engineer, right? So when engineers start tinkering with things, they almost approach it like the best tools were once toys. And that's how I do this. And I'm able to collect a bunch of data, but I'm also able to see under these abnormal stressing situations with a severely underpowered server, exactly what happens when things break. And that is very important to me as an engineer. I need to know how to manage faults when they occur. First, I need to know what they look like. And if you're unfamiliar with Azure, it's okay. Everybody has to start somewhere, right? Realize the very first thing, and I think the most important thing I can share with you about working with Azure in any form or fashion is that it changes daily. Azure changes daily. And if that worries you or upsets you, if you like things to say the same all the time, I get you. I do. But that's just not the reality in Azure. So just be aware of that going in. When things change, sometimes it breaks the, my old E-machine here, or the applications that I built running on it. I've got 2 applications that I wrote. All together, they're probably a couple dozen lines of code. And they're written in C# and they're command line, and I execute them with Windows Scheduler. One of them uploads every hour, about 12 minutes past the hour. It uploads to Azure Storage Explorer. Azure Storage, not Storage Explorer. It uploads to a blob container called CONTAW for Container Andy Weather. You can't see it well on the screen right now, but when we go into the demo, we're going to rebuild this. And I promise I've got Zoom It running right now. I have a witness. And we're going to zoom in when we start actually building this loader and the process that we're going to talk about next. Whenever that blob gets loaded, there's a trigger on the blob that fires an Azure Data Factory pipeline. And it's a very simple pipeline. It calls a store procedure that's going to truncate the table. And then it calls a copy activity. And we're going to build that out, build a brand new one. We're actually going to build a store procedure that truncates the table, everything, soup to nuts. We're even going to construct our data factory. That's how hands-on this is going to be. And the demos are live. I type in demos because every now and then I fail. And the last thing I want you to think is that you can just push the buttons and everything works the first time. That's not how data engineering works. I promise you, it doesn't matter how good you are at it. So we truncate and then we load, and that's a pattern in data integration / data engineering. It loads to an Azure SQL database, really, really small setting. It's a basic setting with the lowest, I think it's 2 gigs, and it's the $5 a month version of this, but I'm just pumping data into there. I'm truncating and loading every single time an upload happens. That fuels a website that also severely underpowered, andyweather.com. You can go check it out. I think the latest reading that's in there is probably a couple of weeks old because something broke and I've been busy getting ready to talk to you. So I haven't had time to go in and figure out exactly what's broken with it, but that's okay. There's also a Twitter account called Andy Weather, and it'll also tweet about every 15 minutes or so. It tweets, and it only posts a tweet if it says this is a new or new looking tweet. Now that new looking is a gotcha, because it's posted the same data from about 2 weeks ago a few times here lately. So that's going to happen, but it's just neat to be able to do this. Now, if you're looking at my screen right now, down at the very bottom is a link to a blog post called Andy Weather Internet of Things. And if you go search andyleonard.blog for that, you can go get the code for those applications. There's the one that does the tweeting and the one that uploads the blob every hour. And again, I just schedule them with Windows Scheduler. Also, the slides will be available. If you're watching the recording, they are available. I haven't uploaded them yet because I wanted to surprise everybody with the virtual selfie. So that's why. Let's start building this, if that's okay. I want to walk through the demo of how we build this. And to do that, to start off with, I'm going to need to construct a brand new Azure Data Factory. I actually had this built, and I was talking with Eric and Radu, our awesome technician, earlier, and it was like, you've got 75 minutes. And I've been used to doing this in 45 to 60. I'm like, I'm going to go on and build the, I'm going to build out the data factory. So there's a number of ways to start this, right? You can go to create a resource, and let's just start there. And then in here, I'm under new, I'm going to type data factory. And before I even get finished, I'll see an Azure Data Factory there. All right, I'll pick that. I want to create one. And yep, that's the subscription I want to use. And let's see, there we go. RG Pass Summit, that's our resource group. I love using resource groups because like when I'm done with this, right now I'm paying $5 a month for this database that we've got in there. I'm going to burn that down by just going to the resource group, and it'll delete the resource group and everything in it. Kind of cool. Good way to manage that and kind of group it together. I'm in the East US. I'm in Farmville, Virginia. And let's see if I can create ADF Pass Summit 2020. Let's see if that's available. It'll check here when I click off of it. And for a second, it said it wasn't available. That's because I built it a little while ago. For Git configuration, I need to come here. I can't just go over to review and create yet because this is defaulted to setting up Git, using Azure DevOps or GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and check configure Git later, but I like that that's the default, that you should configure that. And when I click review and create, it's going to run a validation and give me a validation pass or not. If I had not checked this box, when I went to review and create, it would say, hey, required information is missing or not valid. And it'll give me a little dot here telling me there's your problem. So again, if I go back here at validation passes and we're all good, I click create and it's just going to spin here for a couple minutes. And while that's happening, it's a good opportunity for anyone to ask any questions that you may have. That happened really, really fast. Good job with that. And I'm going to go back to my resource group. But if you have a question, and if anybody's typed in a question, feel free to interrupt me here, Eric, and I'll be happy. This is a good spot to ask questions and answer them. You could see the Azure Data Factory is not showing up yet. But do you have anything, Eric? I see you popped up.
Not so far.
Okay.
Although I do have a comment from Hope. Brave man living on the edge, devil.
Thank you, Hope. If that's the Hope, I think she knows.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Go watch everything Hope Foley presents. It's awesome stuff. I like living on the edge. Okay, so when I refresh this, hit this little refresh link here, you see ADF Pass Summit 2020 showed up. Pardon me, I drank too fast. And I've got the little ADF logo here. I like doing pseudo-Hungarian notation here. When I click that, pardon me, when I click that, it takes me over to the ADF Pass Summit page. And I've got author and monitor here. When you click on author and monitor, it takes you to the dashboard. I'll zoom out. We'll see the dashboard here. And I'll make this a little skinny so we can kind of keep up with it when I zoom in. Lots of good stuff on the overview page here. When I started working with ADF back in my day, when we had to carve our own computer chips out of wood, there were only 3 of these little bubbles on here. Now it's grown to 6. But create a pipeline, create a data flow, and this is a mapping data flow, I think. I think it defaults to that. I'm not sure if wrangling's included in there yet or not. Create a pipeline from a template, just copy data, configure an SSIS Integration Runtime, and set up a code repository. Just so you know, there's a lot of consternation, I'll say, around SSIS these days. SSIS is still out there. It's still being used, and it's going to still be used for a lot of time to come. They support it in Azure Data Factory with the Azure SSIS Integration Runtime. Not deprecated, not discouraged. It's out there for real and for true. So just be aware of that. There's these author. So if we zoom in here on the page types, I can actually expand this. There's Data Factory overview, and then the author monitor and manage page. And it's been just, I don't know, 6 months or so when this manage page showed up. There were a lot of things that was on the author page. They've been changed. So you can see we have a brand new Azure Data Factory here, no pipelines, no data sets, no data flows. I mean, again, we just created this, right? It still has that new ADF smell. So in here, we can create a new pipeline from here, or we can just hit this plus and we can create all sorts of stuff here if we'd like. I'm going to do a pipeline. And when I do that, notice my publish all lights up. You can't publish an empty pipeline, or you couldn't. It may have changed because things change. But you can't, as far as I know, you can't. It wouldn't do you much good if you could do one. But I want to go ahead and name this one. I'm going to say copy AW data. That's going to be the name of the pipeline for copying anti-weather data. And the properties of the pipeline are over to the top, at least this first set of properties. But I can minimize that by just clicking that properties link. And the rest of the properties are still down here at the bottom, like parameters and variables and output. We're not going to do any of that. This is going to be a pretty straightforward. But the way we're going to approach building this, it's going to be a straightforward demo. But the way we're going to approach building this is we're going to use something called flexible order of authoring. And you can build from the bottom up in Azure Data Factory, and you can build from the top down. That's the flexibility part of flexible order of authoring. And probably the cool way to demonstrate that is to go from the top down. So that's what I'm going to do. We have a list of activities over here. If we go to the manage page, we'll see things like link services and the like. We're going to start out building the functionality that we need. So the very first thing we're going to need here is a stored procedure activity. And by the way, these activity icons here, they just went color. It's like in the last, I don't know, a little bit, few days here. So if I go to store procedure and drag this on here, before this, it was nice, and it wasn't black and white, but it was kind of monochrome. I like the new icons. If you're brand new at dealing with these, you'll note that there is a delete here. There's a little code bracket here, and you can kind of tell because the codes are curly braces that this is going to be JSON. So if I click that, we can see the basics of just the stored procedure activity, the name, and the user properties and all of that. That's all there. And you can copy that to the clipboard if you'd like and manipulate it. You can edit it right here and then click close. My friend Kevin Hazard, who is a really smart architect, he calls JSON hipster XML. I think he's on to something there, just saying. We can also clone these, right? So I can make a brand new one. Once I've got this configured, it's a lot more useful to clone it, but nice functionality. You can also clone pipelines themselves. And that's a great way to kind of incrementally build out your functionality, right? You get this piece working in a pipeline, and then you go deploy that so that you don't lose it. But then you can also clone it and clone that pipeline, and then you kind of pick up where you left off and keep going. Love that. I'm going to go ahead and drop this. These are outputs. And if you're familiar with other data integration and data engineering engines like SSIS, they look a lot like precedence constraints. And that's not a bad way to think about this, because the pipeline itself is more of an orchestration engine. And that reminds me of the control flow in SSIS. It's not like pumping data around. And we're going to put a copy activity on here in a minute, and that's exactly what it's going to do. But we now have mapping data flows that are analogous to the functionality presented in a data flow task in SSIS. So way different, completely different engine, and there's all sorts of benefits to using one or the other. New does not always mean better, just so you know, but nice functionality available in both. The art part of architecture, and by the way, being a data integration or data engineering architect means you get the science, but you also get the art. And the art part's hard. And it means you know what to pick when and where. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But we are going to name this. I'm going to call this whack because this is the truncate. And maybe I should use something a little more professional sounding than that, but no, we're going to go with whack. Now, the next thing is it's going to ask me to pick a link service and then a stored procedure name. So before I go any farther here, I want to create a stored procedure in my database. Now, I have created a database here, and let's see, we want to pop over to Azure Data Studio. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Azure Data Studio, but it's kind of cool. And I saw a really good presentation from some members of the team, Vicky Harp and some other members of the team there. And I apologize for not remembering the other members of the team, but it was great yesterday. Go check out that recording. They've done a ton of added functionality to this. So this is actually creating the table. The table doesn't even exist right now. In fact, that's what I had this out there for. If I refresh this, you'll see there are no tables in there. But if we execute this this bit of T-SQL here, and I write my T-SQL like this, if that bothers you, I'm sorry. Write your T-SQL like you like it, and I'll do the same. That's okay. I'm gonna press F5 here to execute it. We see our messages popping out here, and it tells me, and I like doing this. I don't like commands completed successfully. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd much rather have this than say an error, but I'd like for it to tell me what it's doing, what commands completed successfully. So I do use these print statements here. It tells me where it's, what I'm doing and where, and then I'm creating it, and then it was created. Why do I do the two messages here? Well, something bad could happen in that operation of creating the table. If I just get this, then, I'll know, and then I get an error, I'll know exactly where that error happened. Also, it's idempotent, which means I can re-execute the function and get the same result. And it checks for the existence of that table, and it tells me it already exists. And I often get this question. People say, Andy, you mean you type all of this every single time? Yes. Yes, I do. And I like copying these messages and sending them, putting them in the notes field of a ticketing system in the enterprise. And the reason I do that is I'm being intentional as as an architect. I want people to know I ran this at this time and this is what happened. So, and one time this actually saved my job. But that's a story for another day. Now we've created the table. So what we can do is I can get the table name here on the, just the table name on the clipboard. I'm going to create a new window here. I think Control N will do a new command. And I'm just going to, in this case, I'm going to break my rule because I have some neat functionality here. Create or alter dbo.truncate. Let's call it truncate WX reading. I think it's reading. Let's look at our tables here, see if that's in there. Refresh. Yep. dbo.wx reading. That's going to be my stored procedure. And that's why it's fussing at me because I didn't type the word procedure. Create or alter stored procedure as And then in here, I'm just going to truncate table paste. Go, and let's see if this works. It's fussing at me a lot. Enable SQL command, not what I want to do, but let's see if that works. And yes, commands completed successfully. So I just violated what I just told you a little while ago. That too will change. Now that we've got the stored procedure set up, let's pop back into our setting of the stored procedure named whack. And right now it's fussing at me about the link service. So when I drop down the link service, it's asking me, which one do you want? I don't have one. This is my very first step in my flexible order of authoring. I'm going to, here, instead of select, I'm just going to click new. And when I do, this new blade slides out. And it's, so it's giving me a link service name. I can pick this up. I'm going to name this SV Pass linked service. And so that's my server to my new link service. I could add an optional description here. It's asking me which, what flavor am I using here? I'm using an Azure SQL database. Do I want to use a connection string or Azure Key Vault? So I'm going to use a connection string from my Azure subscription, but I need to tell you, Azure Key Vault's pretty cool. I use it for others, for stuff other than just storing like encrypted passwords and stuff like that, because it's easier to make changes to some of that stuff, and it just keeps getting better. From which Azure subscription one I like to use, I'm going to use my enterprise data and analytics, and then I want to pick server pass. My database is named DB Pass. I'm going to use SQL authentication, and that's my username, and then my password. Again, you can see where I could pull that from the vault. I'm just going to type it in here and hope I type it correctly. But I can do more than hope. I can actually test the connection. And when we do that, it's going to give me a connection succeeded or not. Also, my password helper here is coming out because it says, I see a password, time for me to show up and ask if you need my help. I don't, but I really appreciate you offering. Let's click create. And this is creating that link service. So you can see my link service value gets filled in here in the blank. And if we go all the way back to the top here, we see we're still at a publish all of #1. So it's not technically going to publish that link service, but we're going to get to some stuff in a minute where it will when we start talking about data services. Data sets. When I dropped this stored procedure name down, it went out there and queried the stored procedures list, and it brought back this this truncate WX reading. It found the stored prog that we just created. I'm going to use that. Now, there are no parameters for this, but if there were, I could click import and it would actually bring them in. And by the way, if you're, anytime you see these little circles with an I in the middle, if you hover over that, it gives you really good information almost all the time. Every now and then I've seen it where it kind of needs to do a better job of giving you information. But these are often, almost always, very helpful blurbs here. So again, we could test the connection again up here at the top. Our connection was successful. Our stored procedures in here. We could edit the name of this stored procedure. We could add this here, and then I could have gone and created the stored proc rather than picking it from the list. That's really it. That's all I need to do. Now, there are 0 records in my table right now. We can pop over to Azure Data Studio and make a brand new, control N brand new, and I can select, not select C, select count star as record count from dbo.wx reading. And when we do that, F5, we should get a record count of 0. So running a test right now inside of ADF is only going to let us know that ADF is configured correctly. The stored procedure in this particular pipeline is configured correctly, but let's do it. When we click on debug, we get this output window that pops up here, and we can see from just looking at the messages here, see that little I? I'm trying to talk for 20 seconds to say, change that queued status to succeeded. It's already finished, by the way, but it's going to wait about 20 seconds. And every 20 seconds, it'll refresh automatically like it just did for 5 minutes. After that, you have to click refresh manually like I just did there. But it only took 2 seconds. The WAC stored procedure executed and succeeded. It's giving me a little green check mark there. I'm feeling the love. I'm liking what it's showing me here. So, all right, we're all good with that. The next piece of this is we're going to need to go get the data, and we're actually going to get a copy of the data that I uploaded to an Azure Blob storage. That's going to be our source. And then our destination is going to be the same table we just whacked, truncated, sorry. So let's talk about how we might do that. So if I go look at, if I minimize the general window here, if I go to move and transform, there's my copy data. You remember I deleted the output from here. We had a success output here. I can add an output right here. If I click this, we can add success, failure, completion, and skipped. So interesting options here. We're familiar, if you're familiar with SSIS, success, failure, and completion is not, is familiar to you, but skipped, that's something different. I'm going to click success, and then I'm going to drag it over to copy data. When I click on copy data, I'm going to rename this to Andy Weather Data. And notice it was giving me real-time error messages there, real-time feedback. If I put a space here at the end, it's going to fuss at me and say, hey, spaces are only permitted in the middle. And it's giving me all of the rest of the good news here. Love that. It's telling me more. Also, I can click a learn more thing here, optional description, and some fields we're not going to talk about, but also important. There's some things we can do here. The source and sync here. I don't want you to be thrown by the terminology. So source is pretty easy, but sync is a very engineering term, especially in electronics engineering, and that's what I have my degree in. So don't let this throw you. It really just means target or destination. It's more familiar to us data engineering, data integration developers. When I click on source, again, we're going to do some more flexible order of authoring here. So I need a new one. And when I click on new, it brings me back all of these options that I have to create a data set, all of these stores I can pick. And this is constantly growing. It's over 90 now. And it just keeps going. You'll see some of them in preview. If we scroll down through here, see if we can find one that's in preview still. There we go. Marketo or Marketo. I may be pronouncing that wrong. I'm not good with words, but yeah, so lots of good stuff in here. Like I said, over 90 of these are available, and they just keep adding to it all the time. We're going to do Azure Blob Storage. That's the one we're going to pick. When I zoom out, I'm going to click continue here, and then it asks me which one of these do I want to use. Now, up until very recently, it's a few months ago, we didn't have Excel in this list. I think the reason we got Excel is because when people would tell me SSIS is dead, you should go use Azure Data Factory, I'd say, yeah, what if I want to load Excel? And so I think they got tired of hearing me say that. And I don't blame them. I kind of got tired of saying it, but I'm really glad it's in here. And we can use Excel now as a source because a lot of people use Excel. Whether you like Excel or not, I get it. I see it abused all the time. So I totally understand when people fuss about Excel, but I'm telling you, it's here. You can't push a button and change all the people using Excel. We might as well use it as a data source here. So this is delimited text. It's a comma separated value. I'm going to check that box and click continue. And the name of this. So this says set properties up here. Really, I wish they said data set, but set works. I don't just when you see set properties, realize that that's data set. So we're going to create a brand new data set, and this is going to be the AW data CSV file data set. And next, when we look for link services here, we're going to see we don't have a link service configured for this. And when we drop this down, remember we built a link service a minute ago for Azure SQL, right? An Azure SQL database, but it's not in our list because it isn't a CSV link service. I like this filtering. I like this new button. And while I'm building this out, I'd like to ask Eric if there are any questions. And if you have any questions, you can ask them. If you've asked them already, I'm getting to a spot, Eric, in a few seconds where I'd be happy to take a break and answer any. And so I'm going to go configure this link service. And then when we come back from that, is that okay? Take some questions?
That's completely fine. However, Andy, there's no questions yet.
What?
No, there's no questions. It looks like everyone here.
I'm doing a fantastic job, I guess.
You are. I think it's just more like everyone is just like focused and seeing what you're doing. I
Very
did see a
cool.
couple comments, like they're trying to actually zoom in and to see correctly the words were not coming through. I think it was
Gotcha.
just some sort of resolution issue, but I think the majority of the people got it fixed. Adam
Okay.
Anderson, by the way, shout out. Thank you. He just shared how to sort of like fix it. So
Good deal. Thanks so much. This is what I love about community. We're always helping each other out.
totally,
And
totally.
I mean, the past community is top shelf. Great, great, great.
Yes.
Cool beans. Okay, I'm sorry for those of you who weren't able to see it. I know how that looks. It can look a little grainy. A friend of mine was presenting yesterday, and I saw it. And he had one of these like the Wall O monitor. I don't know if you've seen it. They're huge, big. I love those because I can watch TV without my glasses. I am very close to this monitor, and it's not small, but I try to set the resolution when I'm presenting and saying it. Look, everybody in 2020 is winging a lot of stuff. Okay, a little grace, please, a little grace. Okay, so all right, let's talk about this link. This is a new link service for Azure Blob storage here, and this is going to be the Andy Weather CSV file, and this is going to be the link service to that file. So I've kind of been talking about these things, and now that we're in a data set / link service thing where we're configuring this, I don't think I've used a movie quote yet, and I need to apologize for that. I like movie quotes. So I want to share this with you. ADF is like an onion. Anybody know what that's from? I'll give you a few seconds to put that in, what movie quote that's from. But there's layers. There's many layers. That's another part of the quote. So what we've got is we got the pipeline sitting here in the middle doing the orchestration. We just talked about that. Inside the pipeline, we've actually got in there, we got all these activities, and they can reach out and touch a bunch of integration runtimes. All we're using right now is the default called auto resolve integration runtime. And they can do an amazing list of things, but there are other runtimes. My favorite, the Azure SSIS Integration Runtime, where I can go run SSIS packages that are stored in blob storage or stored in file shares rather, or stored in an SSIS catalog that resides in the cloud. So there's things happening in here. And then when you put those into the pipeline, right? And the integration runtime is kind of connecting the pipeline to the rest of this stuff. So we got data sets sitting out here for some things, but not all. Remember, we didn't need a data set to execute our WAC stored procedure, our truncate table. But here, in order to reach the CSV file, we're using a data set. And then outside of that is this link service. And this is kind of how how Azure Data Factory pipelines communicate with the outside world. I see Eric. I bet he's got a question.
I don't have a question, but there's people got your quote and they guessed correctly. Ian Grove said Shrek, hopefully as well. Nicole Bennett, Leslie Dress, Alan Troutman. Yeah, they all got your quote. Is it correct, Shrek?
It is correct. It was Shrek. Yes.
Perfect.
Like a fantastic movie, I think. But
totally, I agree with you.
I love that. Usually I work in a Princess Bride here, so that's coming. But here we are. And by the way, I was just mentioning that integration runtime, the auto resolve integration runtime is the only one we have here. But look, we could create another one. There is so much that I'm just kind of glossing over here. There's a ton of flexibility that you can do for things like scale and performance. There's a lot of things you can do inside of both Azure Data Factory and in Azure Synapse Analytics. Like I said, they kind of started in the same space, and then Synapse Analytics has grown. I can use different types of authentication methods here. So there's an account key, and a shared access signature. Oh gosh, universal resource. I forget. I don't think it's uniform, maybe resource. I forget. Service principals and managed IDs. I'm actually going to use the SAS shared access signature here. I'm going to click that. And again, it starts asking me questions that are Key Vault enabled. This is encrypted when we're actually done with it. You'll see that in just a minute. But the first thing is it's asking me, hey, where is this thing that you're saying is going to be our source, the CSV file? I see Eric again. What you got, Eric? I can't hear you, Eric. I see your lips moving.
Sorry for that. It has to happen in this virtual world, that you forget to either unmute yourself or put your camera. So like we do have a couple questions here. We have a question from Brian Klinger. It says, does Data Factory have third-party transforms such as Task Factory, Cozy Rock, like SSIS?
So you have the ability to reproduce that kind of functionality, but you don't have exactly that same thing. It's not a one-to-one match. So let me expand on that answer just a little bit. You have things in Azure Data Factory that are, you can do them in SSIS, but it's challenging to do them. They work really, really well inside of ADF because ADF is native to Azure. You can do things like Azure Functions and Logic Apps, and you can reach out and touch some of those services and just consume those really, really well. I absolutely love working with REST APIs inside of Azure Data Factory. Can you do that? And you mentioned Task Factory, which is a product of SentryOne, who's a sponsor of the past summit. So I don't feel bad calling them out. But Cozy Rock, other places, other companies that are out there doing that sort of stuff. Yes, you can. And in fact, you can use those in Azure SSIS when you create an Azure SSIS integration runtime there. In fact, when you in the process, there's a way to check a box, and there's a number of them that are right there inside. They're already uploaded and available inside of Azure for you to configure and use. You just add your license key if you purchased it, or if you're running a free version, you run that. Hope that answers your question.
Sorry for that. We also have another question from Tom Norman Jr. It says, if I have a linked service created and the source changes for the data sets, can I change the linked service and have it change on all data sets? This would be for a migration plan.
Right. So there's a way to dynamically configure linked services, Tom, but it's well beyond what we're going to talk about here. But I already know Tom, and we can talk about it offline, definitely. But please reach out, anyone that has any questions about that. I have a folder on my machine, on my laptop here, called Primordial Blogs, and it's just notes, mostly Notepad, that says blog about this, blog about that. There's about 100 in there. That's in there, I think, twice. I just haven't gotten to blogging about it yet, so I apologize for that. Yes, Eric.
Hopefully says, using parameters / expressions in ADF were a challenge for me to learn. Any good resources you'd recommend? So
Hope, they were a challenge for me to learn too. And there's a number of Microsoft Docs. I just have to refer you to those. In fact, I've got one somewhere. If I could dig it up before we end, I will do that and share that link. Again, this one is being able to do the to blog about how to do this and share my experiences with it. Look, I'm not as smart as the folks at Microsoft, and I'm not as smart as many of you, and I'm fine with that. I love learning new stuff, but often I'll read through those docs and I'll try to figure out what they're talking about, and I just don't understand. So I break it down where I can understand it. And I think that's why some people like my blog, is because I'll kind of spell it all out. And I promise you that that's something that I want to move with, Hope. I struggled with this too. I haven't blogged about it yet. And one of the reasons is it's changed a couple of times as I started working through it. And that's okay. That's not a complaint. It's just me admitting that I share your struggle with that, Hope. One other thing I'd like to mention, we were talking about the SentryOne Task Factory earlier, and custom tasks or custom activities, in this case in Azure Data Factory. You can still write custom tasks. In fact, the book I'm working on now that's coming out next year, I write a demo task in there, and at the end, we deploy it to an Azure SSIS Integration Runtime. And I show you how to do all of that, how to build the MSI, and how to deploy it and set everything up so that you can actually do that. So that's part of a little plug for the book there. Hope that's okay. Building custom tasks in SSIS second edition. That's what that's about. Great questions. Thank you. So how do I get this SAS URI here to find this file that I'm after? Well, the CSV file is stored in Azure Blob storage. And let's bring that up. This is Storage Explorer here. And we take a look at it. This is the Accurate weather.csv file. That's the one we're after. It's in a blob container that I named pass, and it's in an account called STAW. This is the actual Andy Weather account. If I click here, this is my production, if you will, version of this. And we can see it was uploaded at 6:13 a.m. That's what it says here. I think it's been, yep. So 8:13. It's actually been updated since I opened the container here. But this one was from 6:13, I think, or 6:48. So if I refresh this one, yep, there it is. So what we're going to do is, in order for the link service and the data set to reach in here and grab this file, it needs permission. And I absolutely love the ability to get a shared access signature. I'm doing it at the container level. I'm just going to read. I don't have to do anything else. And here's what I love about this. So I am not a DBA. Okay. I'm not. I'm a developer. We're different. I worked with data a lot, but not a DBA. But I have actually tried to do the job of a DBA before, and I didn't get fired. But what I love about this is when I grant people access, I was always going in. Somebody say I need access for 30 days. And I was always going in and setting a reminder on my calendar. Hey, and I would actually type the command out, drop, the stored procedure to deny access after this, revoke access, deny, and so that I would remember to do it at that time. This, when I set this, it's a day. It's 24 hours into the future here already. But I could just as easily do that, right, and give myself access at a month out there, and it just goes away. It denies it. I don't have to set a reminder on my calendar. It just starts denying access to this. Love this. Love it, love it, love it. Saves me a step. When I click create here, this is giving me my, my container information here. Now, what I'm really after, if I look at this, is I'm really after this piece right here, at least the beginning. This is the path to my blob. This is the URI. And I'm going to click copy here. It's probably going to copy the whole thing. But I'm going to pop back over to my configuration here. And you can see it's kind of telling me here, HTTPS, my account, blob.core.windows.net. And I think that's what I've got here, something like that. So, yep, STAW, blob.core.windows.net, pass. And then what I want to do is delete all this stuff and put in Accurate weather.csv. Now I'm going case sensitive here because, well, just because. The next piece is this SAS token, shared access signature token. And that's this guy right here. In fact, you can see if I flip back and forth, you can see there's the question SV, and there's my little sample question SV. It's doing everything it can to help me out here. And when I paste this in here, you'll also note that it hides it. So this is a test connection to the link service. And if I test this connection, when I click test connection, it's going to make sure that I can get in there. When you see this, connection successful, that's great. Sometimes you won't see that. And usually it gives you a more info link, and you can hit that and you'll get a little balloon with a JSON error, a message there. And you may have to, sometimes there's a link in there that you can go for more information and run that down. I think kudos to the ADF team, and just hats off. I think they've done a fantastic job. Some of them I've become friends with recently, Dan, and then others like Way I've been friends with for a long time. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. Yes, I see Eric. You're muted, Eric. Oh, there, now you're unmuted.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to finish.
That's so good. What do you got?
We got a question from a couple questions. One from Tayob Ali. How do I know what integration runtime to use?
Tayob, first off, welcome. My brother from another mother, and good friend. So you will often have an option to pick or create a new integration runtime, and the auto resolve integration runtime is the one you get by default. When I'm doing demos, I'm always using that. But when I'm in production, sometimes I'm scaling and I'm creating new instances of integration runtimes. Most often, I'm doing something along the lines of Azure SSIS because Microsoft has done the Azure SSIS team, Sandy Winarko, who presented last night, and that crew, they have done a phenomenal job of removing the friction between running SSIS on premises and then taking it to the cloud. The reason for that is not just because they love SSIS. It's because they want to enable enterprises who already have this, a lot of investment in SSIS running data integration on premises. They want to be able to help them lift and shift what they've got up to the cloud. But that's not where it stops. You start there and you start building these ADF pipelines that enable you to use all of these other services. Like under the hood, you can use Databricks, a very powerful engine, does auto scaling, and you don't have to, tell it to auto scale. You have to tell it not to. So, there's all of this functionality that can be under the hood here, and you'll find that you were doing it this way in SSIS, but there's a much better way to do this in ADF. And as you move through that, it's the art part of architecture, right? You're trying to figure out what works best where. And to directly answer your question, Tayob, when I'm approaching a solution like that, I've got this hybrid type thing where I can use my old SSIS, or I can use, and that has its own runtime, or I can use the auto resolve runtime and do something with one of these other services that are available. For me, it's always a question of test it and see. And part of the reason for that answer is it changes. It's going to change in a week, in a month. It may change tomorrow. So that's my best advice, is to tinker around with it. And really what this is enabling is it's enabling an enterprise, the enterprise's ability to execute these kinds of tests all the time. So you can actually flip it back and forth, right? You run, maybe you're running your SSIS version and it's doing okay. It costs X amount of dollars. You run a version that's running on Databricks to accomplish the exact same data engineering task, and it costs X amount of dollars. It could be that the financial constraint drives which way you go. It could be that your business is in a race. I've done work for businesses where the first enterprise to identify data to be operated upon wins, and that happens. I've made this statement time and time again, and I'm going to wedge it into your question, Tayo, because I know we're friends and you'll be cool with me on this. What's different now? We have a different way of operating in Azure, a way that we had before, but it took way more time and effort. So in the past, we could load our data warehouse, and maybe we're doing it and it's costing us $100. Now we can load our data warehouse and it can cost us $100. So if you're sitting there scratching your head and going, Andy, you just said the same thing twice. You're right. I left out the lever, the new lever, and that's we can scale up. So maybe it takes 24 hours to load our data warehouse and costs us $100, or it takes us 3 minutes to load our data warehouse and it costs us $100. Now that's what happens when we move that lever. We can scale up and scale down. Now, those numbers are completely fictitious, and don't. Andy said it would cost 100. No, please don't. But I'm just telling the thing. So in some cases, an extra 23-hour and 57-minute jump on the competition is well worth it. And because you can scale like that, you can throw more resources at it really quickly. You move the slider and hit apply, and in a minute or several minutes, bam, you're ready to run. So I hope that makes sense. Anything else, Eric?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Andy. Nicole Bennett says, I have been putting my truncate WAC in the sync properties instead of a SP. Is there advantages or disadvantages to doing that, or is it mostly preference?
The first answer to everything in engineering is if it works, it's good. So it doesn't matter. It's just a way, honestly, it's a way to get another activity on this introductory pipeline that we're talking about here. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Let me see. We have another one from Kevin. I just want to make sure. Kevin Dunn. How do you configure Data Factory to use specific internal IP addresses to communicate with specific endpoints in Azure and on-prem?
So first off, that's a little beyond what we're talking about here, but that when you create Azure resources, and this specifically applies to servers, there's a security checkbox you can set on the firewall settings where you can say allow this server to interact with other Azure services. That is a really 10,000, maybe 50,000 foot answer to that. So the more accurate answer is that it is configurable, but it's beyond what we're going to talk about today.
And just a couple more from Jim. It says, is ADF included in initial release of Azure Arc?
Azure Synapse Analytics is the Azure Arc, Arc-ish version that you'd want to look at. Similar, but they're diverging some. And actually what's happened in the functionality is they've diverged and then they've kind of come back together and diverged more. So that's going to continue to happen. But yep, you're going to want to look, if you're looking in Arc, you're going to want to look at Azure Synapse Analytics. You can use wherever data is stored. As you can see, we've got 90 connectors here. I can still use ADF to just reach in and do what I'd like to do, read and write.
Okay, we have a couple other questions, but I guess, do you want to continue or want me to read you those?
Yeah, let me pop through this. And what's going to happen is we're going to get to a spot where we got about 2 minutes of this running. Totally. And that'll provide a great window for that. But great questions. Please keep them coming.
Sounds good, Andy. Back to you.
Thank you. So once we've got a successful connection, I'm going to click create. It's going to build my link service. That's exactly what it just did here. And here's takes me back to my set properties, which remember is data set. Here we're on, it's wanting my container, which is called pass, and my file, which is accuriteweather.csv. And the first row is my header. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box. It's asking me, how do I want to import a schema from the connection and store? And I do, now that I've got this configured. Go ahead and grab the schemata out of that file, out of that CSV file. And when I click OK, and this is a little confusing, if it doesn't give me an error, it worked. So I like that. And there it is. And just to double check, and I'm big on unit testing, I can kind of do a quick little glance here at my data just by hitting that preview data button there. So there it is. There's my data. I'm digging it. We're good. And I'm just going to leave everything else set as the defaults, except for this recursive. I've only got one file in there. I don't need to go recursive on it. Next is the sync data set. And again, if we look at here, I've got a data set, but it's a CSV. I'll go ahead and click new. And I'm going to scroll down and look at Azure SQL Database. There we go. I'll click continue on that one. And it wants to know the name of my set. Remember, this is data set. And this is going to be my WX readings table. And it's also a data set. I like to prefix or suffix the data set topic in. My link service, notice I can reuse this link service we used when we configured the truncate stored proc. I'm going to go ahead and import the schema from connection and store. When I click OK, schema import failed. Please select the table. That's what I forgot. In fact, when I checked that box, I think it did do the table. That's my bad. Let's fix that and try again. Okay. So now we've got a nice connection here. There's a lot of options. We're just going to skip like stored procedures, table options, create the table, that sort of stuff. We're going to drop right into mapping. And when we do, and I click import schemas, it's going to look at the file and it's going to look at the database table. And I'm pretty sure the reason these line up is because I've got them in the same order. But you can see that the field names are wildly different. The data types are the same. I'm doing strings all across. And the reason for that is whenever I'm importing data from a file, strings will work. I want to get that data into the data store, and then I can manipulate it, whether it's a data lake or a database or a file. Usually I want to bring it into from a file into some sort of store. like a database, and then I can manipulate it from there. So I write it as text when I do that. We can preview the source. We've already done that. We're good. I'm not going to do settings here, but I am going to go look again at my publish all. So why do I have 3 here now? Well, part of the reason is that in addition to the pipeline, I created 2 data sets. And if we click that publish all button, we get this nice little publish all blade. I love this. This showed up a few months ago. It's telling me, here's all your new stuff, the pipeline and the 2 data sets. So really, really groovy that it's there. I'm going to click publish and it'll start publishing. And while it's doing that, it's going to publish what I built out here. So we're going to do a debug execution of this right now. And Eric, this is a good time to jump in with the other questions. This takes a couple of minutes.
So I think good question here from Robert Plata. It says, I thought that the first question mark had to be removed from the SAS token. Has this changed now?
No, well, I don't know if it had to in the past. And that may have been, now that I think about it, it may have been a thing with ADF version 1. No, you don't have to remove it.
Awesome. Sorry for that.
That's okay. No.
We got also David. I'm just having here issues with names. I'm sorry for butchering people's last names. David Rigger. Can you use C to bring customs DLLS? I use this to read custom files, bank format, which is from old mainframe days, into memory and then consume through ADF. Did that make sense, my question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Talking about coding in the C language to do that.
Yes.
I'm not sure if C is supported in things like in other Azure services. C#, yeah, like in functions, Azure functions, and the like. And that would be my first guess, but I'm guessing. Often what I will do if I'm in a situation where I need to convert data from old mainframes is I'll fall back to old SSIS. The flat file, the connection manager for flat files is extremely flexible. And I have yet to encounter a flat file that I cannot read from whatever format it's in, and I can dump it into a CSV out if I want to go that direction, or I could stuff it into a database. I can even run this on premises and target, a mainframe file there internally in my network, and just with a connection string, load that into Azure SQL database, kind of like I'm staging this data now.
Right. I have a really good question about Salman, Mike Salmans. He says, if I had an awesome beard like that, I will be playing with it all the time. How do you keep your hands off of it?
That's funny. That's funny. This is my wife's idea. And it actually came a little undone here the past couple of days. I haven't had time to, she rebraids it. I haven't had time for her to rebraid it. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm protecting you by hiding as much of this face as I can. That's my thinking. Let me jump in here for just a minute. We're going to do this again. But I want to move forward. Thanks, Eric. And thank you all for the questions. This little dashboard here, I was able to bring it up. Let me zoom out so you can see what I was doing here. In the output piece, you've got these little glasses here. I love this. When I click this, it shows me a lot of really good information. It's a little dashboard about the copy data. It tells me how many rows I wrote, 109,331. It told me how long it took to run them. The copy duration was just under 2 minutes. And this is the one big metric I love, is throughput. This is, how many kilobytes per second that I'm loading. And I'm okay with that as long as I can compare it with other executions of this. But yeah, it ran through a bunch of peak connections here. And it's just a lot of stuff here. We're not going to unpack all of it, but I absolutely love this metadata because I like keeping up with how my data integration is performing. So the very last part of this is how do we get this to schedule? And we can add a trigger here. We can actually trigger this by clicking trigger. Now, this is a manual trigger. And if we do this, we can actually go to the monitor page and we'll see the trigger type was manual. But I can also create a new trigger. Absolutely love that we have this available to us in ADF. And if I click on a new trigger, I'm just going to call this trigger on Blob create, creative naming there. And I just want to share with you a little bit. Let's set this to say 2 p.m., which is UTC time. That's where it is here. And it says that right now. What schedule means is schedule says this is, you're going to create the recurrence between the starting of this pipeline execution and the start of the next one. Now, that's a little subtle. So let me go to tumbling window because it's slightly different. This says this is 15 minutes between the end of the last execution and the start of the next one. So what would happen is this pipeline took about 2 minutes to run, remember? If we scheduled this, then, and it started at 2 p.m., it would run at 2 p.m., then it would run at 2:15, start at 2:15, it would start again at 2:30, start again at 2:45. Each time it would run for 2 minutes. In a tumbling window, however, it would start at 2 p.m., run 2 minutes to 2:02, and then it would start at not 2:15, but 2:17. It would have 15 minutes there. Run for 2 more minutes, go to 2:19, and then the next one would be 15 minutes later, 2:34. So this is more about the gap between the end of the previous execution and the start of it. And what we're going to configure for this is event, and this is cool. So for my Azure subscription, I'm going to pick my Enterprise Data and Analytics. I'm going to go pick my STAW storage account. Remember, I've got because the container in there is pass. I'm going to type that in, and the blog path begins with, I'm just going to type the entire file name in here. And this has worked in the past. I don't know if it's going to work today or not. And I'm going to do blob created because when I overwrite that blob, it actually fires the blob created at the completion of the upload of the new blob. Hope that makes sense. If you did stuff like this in other engines like SSIS, sometimes you'd be loading a large file and it may take 5 minutes for, say, an SFTP file to come up. Well, if you were doing, depending on how you were detecting a new file is there, you may try to trigger a data flow while the file was in use by the SFTP process. This kind of manages that. Notice it's giving me this asterisk on activated, and it's going to give me a warning when I do this. I'm going to click continue. And the warning is, make sure you have specifically, that's not the right warning. It did find the file. There's that. When I click continue again, there's the warning. Make sure to publish the trigger to be activated after clicking OK. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to trigger, we're going to cause a trigger by stressing out my 25 meg DSL up here. As soon as this gets finished publishing, and we're going to be at a great place for questions. I see you over there, Eric. I see your head popping up. So we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and close this. And in the pass here, I'm going to go ahead and upload a file. And this is going to be a copy, the same copy, in fact, of, let's go downloads. It's the exact same copy, open and upload. Now this is going to take a while. If we watch down here, yep, I want to overwrite it, and I'll be happy to answer the questions Eric has for me.
Yeah. Also, just a heads up, we're approaching here at the top of at the end of the session. So okay. Very quickly, Andrew says, "Is there a way to have your work without having to publish? Sorry, is there a way to save your work without having to publish?"
A good question. I don't think so. At this time, now that could have changed recently. Heck, it could have changed last night. But when you move away from, in fact, let's pop over here and kind of answer this as we go, because this is the better way to answer that question is try it and see. Let's do a new pipeline. Let's put a wait activity on it so that we have something to save, right? This is going to wait 1 second. Absolutely love that I can do dynamic content on it. And so if I move away, so I don't need this anymore. I'm going to take this out. If I try to save this, I can save it as a template. So I guess I could do that. I could export the I could export the JSON for this. I could copy that and save that. But I believe if I, let's just do it. Let's just close. If I just go here and close, sorry, let me zoom out. If I close this tab, that's what I'm after. It's telling me here, changes I made may not be saved. I click leave. I'm back over to the overview page. I'm reopening now that ADF, and we're looking for pipeline 1. I don't think it saves it. It didn't in the past, and it looks like it doesn't now. So you can do it with JSON, storing and or the ARM template, but I'm not sure even the ARM template would include something that hasn't been published. So the real true answer, Andrew, is I don't know, but I always do publish just to make sure. Now you don't have to publish a trigger, right? It can set out there published without ever executing. So that's what I typically do. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Andy. And I love that you're using you're doing this live. You're trying it here and there. I think a lot of people out there are enjoying this.
Well, that's cool. One thing before we take the next question, this blob triggered. It's been running for an hour. Oh, it's not an hour. A minute and 24 seconds. You can see it's in progress. It was triggered by our trigger after our upload happened. It successfully uploaded, and it's on that blob create. Man, I dig that functionality so much. I just love what they do. Also, if you click on this, you get something that looks very outputty. That's a word. I'm published, darn it. I can make up words. I've got a license to spell. Okay. But if I get that same, dashboard appearance that I showed earlier, it looks like it ran faster this time. And one last thing before we go back to the questions, let's pop into our query where we've been counting rows. And there's our 109,331. That's what it was telling us. Okay. I am totally done now. I'm just going to answer questions.
Awesome. Yeah, we actually have just a couple minutes here left for the session. Eric's question, it says, I know you've been doing some BML in the past. Andy, how do you see the future for auto-generating stuff in Azure? Or is there the future already there?
Yeah, so there's some interesting options out there. Microsoft's working on a project called Bicep right now that is kind of built on top of the ARM Azure Resource Management templates. And if you think about it, right, ARM, Bicep, get it, very clever. But they're doing that open source, extremely open, and you can go to the GitHub project to sign up. I blogged about it. There's links there at andyleonard.blog. It's early yet, but they are building what I consider to be the infrastructure to allow us to do even more automation than we can do now.
Awesome. So I see that you have your slide up about the session evaluation. Yeah, that is very important, obviously for PAS, but more importantly also for Andy. So please do not forget to go complete those. I mean, besides that, you also get the opportunity to, be in the Winford Prize. So
right,
why not? Stuff. So Andy,
exactly.
I'm going to ask you to, if you can, because we're almost about to wrap up, if you can please just share your contact information for those people who still have some questions. They know where to contact you. We have one more question here. Can I trigger be deactivated, disable?
Can I trigger?
Sorry, can a trigger be deactivated or disabled? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. You just have to deploy it after you deactivate it. Absolutely. In fact, let's pop over there real quick and look. It's under the triggers here. This is under manage. I didn't even go to the spot, but you can see if you hover here, that's deactivate. So you can deactivate it and then deploy it, and you're basically turning that off. This is a whole sub-science right here. This one screen here for your enterprise. I do just want to make one statement, and back to the thank you slide. First, really appreciate the interaction and the questions. It is always, always, always an honor to present. And I hope you really enjoy and get a lot out of your the remainder of your PAS Summit. Kudos again to the PAS organizers for pivoting back in June to a virtual conference. I think they've done a phenomenal job and deserve our applause. So there, golf clap.
Thanks.
Um,
Thanks,
any-
Andy.
Anything I can do to help, please, please reach out. That's my email address and Twitter handle.
That's awesome, and thank you so much for sharing your contact information. I'm sure a lot of people have benefit from this amazing presentation, and I'm sure they'll be contacting you for more questions. We just have a couple here comments. Great job, Andy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
They've really enjoyed this, and with that, I don't know if you have any final remarks. Are we all
No,
done?
we're all done.
Perfect. Well, Andy, thank you so much once again for coming in here today. And thank you folks out there for joining and tuning in early for a couple of us. And not so early. I know I saw some comments there that some people are in the other side of the world. So lucky for them, they're having lunch and not breakfast. So thank you all. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the rest of we have an amazing lineup as well today. So head over to those sessions and we'll
Yep.
see you around.
Thank you, Eric and Radu, for your help.